Hey, Dr. Juice here. Another episode of Juice TV. Some of you viewers have been asking for a little more hands-on techniques, so we've been filming some Kamloops fishing here along the North Shore of Lake Superior. So I'm going to show you 3 or 4 different methods. First one is with the slinky. Now the slinky is a sinker that doesn't get snagged as much as others. What it is a parachute cord. You can make these yourself. A parachute cord, it's got sinkers in it. Now this will slide over the bottom and doesn't get snagged. And what you use for it is a floating, it could be a floating spawn bag that's got, you put some floating beads in with the spawn bag, and or a little piece of foam, and I get the foam right from this pad that I'm sitting on. You cut a little piece and use a number size 12 hook, and so it'll float up. And then what's typical is a little waxy. It's a grub of a moth, and you put that on there, 1 or 2 of them, and hook it on. But you're using a real small hook. You gotta make sure you got enough flotation. Let me close this. On this little piece of foam here, it's closed cell foam. So now we got our waxy, and so what this is doing is mimicking a mysis shrimp that the Kamloops rainbows are really feeding on. Now there's a gas law called Boyle's law. The deeper you get, the more this compresses, and so a lot of times you can see it right on the surface, a couple inches under. This will be floating the waxy in the hook above this sinker, 12 to 14 inches. But once it gets down to 10 feet, the bubbles are squished, and Boyle's law means that it's not floating as well. And so you got to make sure you got enough flotation. The other thing and you can use this for drifting in the rivers as well. Another method is, let's pretend the slinky isn't on here, and I've just tied this onto the black ant, and I've left a little tag end here. So you get a split shot, you put it on there. Okay, it's on there, but if this gets snagged in the rock, you're going to pull on it, it slides right off the end. All you have to put back on is a split shot. You don't lose your leader, the black ant, your hook, everything else. So that's a good method. It's real good for drift fishing in heavy current as well, for steelhead. That's when you're fishing on the bottom and it's floating up like this, moving back and forth in the current. Now another method, and you can use the floating spawn bags as well. Another method is with the bobbers. Now there's bigger waves, you use a weighted bobber. You can really cast it out there quite a ways. If the fish are farther offshore, you can get way out. And then a looper bug that is marabou, and it's again floating up and down with the waves, has a lot of action, and simulating more of a stonefly, a larger fly. The other thing is, when they're in closer and you can cast, is a smaller float, and this size float, and then a really small fly, size 12 I've got here. People go down to size 20s and 18. This is a little bead head. You can use a pheasant tail. Again, it's the mysis shrimp are white, so you're trying to simulate those shrimp that they're eating. And again, even these small little hooks can really take a 6-8 pound looper. Now the other thing you do is, on the fly, of course, you put your a drop of the Dr. Juice on there, and the scent. Again, these copepods, the zooplankton, the mysis have their own scent, and so this is going to cause them to bite it, take off. You watch your float go down. Okay, when you're using a sinker or a slinky, here's a floating spawn bags tied up with the spawn from the Kamloops. You can use salmon spawn, but it's got a little bead of styrofoam. You get your styrofoam beads, you save the spawn out of the hens that you catch, you get the mesh, tie it up, with some thread, and now this is going to float up off the bottom from your slinky. Okay, spawn from salmon or trout can be very effective in catching those species. They really suck it down. Now you can snell, you can put on a single egg, you could snell on a clump, or you can again use the floating spawn bags. And my theory on this spawn is that an egg floating down the river is a dead egg. When they're spawning, the female is sideways, cutting a red, and the male deposits the milt along with the eggs. They get fertilized. She covers them up and they're under the rocks. Now they're away from the insects and the predators. But a lot of times other fish are following and staying behind spawning steelhead and salmon, and they're picking off the eggs that are floating downstream. And these are the sculpins and the other small fish around. And I feel that the steelhead and salmon are eating their own eggs because that egg floating down is giving protein to their predators, the predators that are going to dig up their eggs out of the gravel. So what they are doing is crushing their eggs. They may not even eat them, but they'll crush them and get them away from the predators. Most animals don't want their predators to get stronger than they are, the predators on their eggs. Now these kamloops are interesting. They are fish that they actually genetically figured out their phenotype, and they traveled up from California up the Columbia River. This is 12,000 years ago, inhabited a large lake that was covering British Columbia inland, and then as the glaciers receded, they stayed there and they became landlocked. So they're up there and they formed their own phenotype, and they're not the Pacific Northwest, the Washington, British Columbia strain. They actually came from California, but now they are more insectivorous. They're eating the zooplankton and the shrimp, and that's why these tiny flies, the size 12, 14, 18, 20, they're just sucking them right in. Or a yarn fly, or fly fishermen are using stone flies, streamers. And so the steelhead is a little different fish. It's stronger than a kamloops, and it ascends. Now kamloops you can keep, and that fishery started in Minnesota in the 70s when they started planting them in the rivers here. They take the eggs at the French River hatchery. They're now raising them at the Spire Valley hatchery, and then they're planting 80,000 to 100,000 of these in 3 different rivers. The Lester, they used to do the Chester, the French, and so, but they're a shore fishery. You can see I don't have a vest on. I've got just my little bag. That's what's another great thing. No boots. You're standing on the rocks right here on the shore, and so it's easy fishing, and it's fishing with floats. It's great for kids to get them into getting a big rainbow trout. And the fly fishermen use the little float indicator as well, and fly line, and then they're using the tiny flies underneath. One of the techniques sometimes, if it's in shallower water, is to slowly move the float in. Last night that was the technique. It was a little muddy near shore, and so a little movement and bringing it right past their face is going to get them to suck it in, and you're going to hook them. So those are some tips from here in the North Shore of Lake Superior on fishing for the kamloops rainbows. And we'll see you again in another episode of Juice TV.